This is UX equals ROI. I'm Jeremy Johnson, Vice President of Customer Experience for Project 202. At Project 202, we're an experience-driven application design development company. We've been around for 14 years now and been able to do some great projects with some great clients. In fact, we have a wide range of projects spanning everything from large-scale enterprise workplace solutions all the way down to mobile applications. And we've really worked all across different industries. But no matter what we do, everything we do, it's all around having customer-centric software development practices. So if you'll see here in these pictures, these are photos from the field. So these are our researchers and our designers going out and observing people. And what we do is we take these observational insights from people and we bring them into the software development process. Here we are out in a consumer's home. This is literally out in the field with someone doing their job. And here is two workplace examples, which happens quite often. But again, it's about understanding the needs, aspirations, and emotions of people and bringing that into this process. And so you'll see here, out and observing, building out mobile apps, e-commerce websites, customer experience journey maps, enterprise applications. We have a validation usability lab, which I'm actually recording this in right now. But I've also worked in-house as well. So I've worked in-house for Sabre, GameStop, and Travelocity running UX and design teams. So I've been able to see kind of both sides of it. If you'd like to get a hold of me on Twitter, I'm at Jeremy Johnson. I have all my decks are available on slideshare.com/Jeremy, and I have a website, Jeremy Johnson Online. And all these slides are available, so feel free to download them. I thought I'd start with a quote. So this is Mike Monteiro, kind of very bombastic kind of guy, speaks the truth. And here's just one of those quotes. Design has as much to do with art as a lobster has to do with a carrot cake. If you truly want a career as a designer, you're going to need to speak about someone's business and organizational goals. You're going to have to learn how to analyze data. You're going to have to learn how to measure effectiveness. And that's because really your job depends on other people seeing that change in their business because UX is relatively new. Design is relatively new to a lot of organizations, and sometimes they have a hard time seeing that value. Here's another way. Design may enhance performance, but unless there are metrics to gauge that benefit, the difference it makes depends on conjuncture and faith, right? So again, measuring that effectiveness. And so as a UX designer, I've always spent some amount of time either evangelizing, selling, explaining, or really marketing myself or what user experience is to people inside organizations. And jokingly, I've been a very, very small UX team at one time, and I spent a large portion of my time kind of evangelizing the value of user experience and kind of how it fits within the process within that organization. And so in the beginning, I was selling to developers and product owners, and in the middle, you kind of moved to selling up to directors and SVP or VPs, and then at the top, today, we spend a lot of time here at Project 202 talking with CEOs, SVPs, EVPs about why design is so important for their business. And because really your value is tied to the value of UX. So either they believe UX has value or they don't. And so sometimes you have to showcase that to them. And again, knowing their business, understanding what those metrics are and showing how design is going to have a positive effect there, right? That's key to this. Here's a survey. It's a little outdated now from 2012, but it says, why is design not relevant to your company? And the first result there is design is not relevant to our industry. So I would argue right now there is not a single industry where it's not relevant to. We've done projects in accounting and for lawyers and government and for farmers and all kinds of interesting industries out there. And design is always relevant and only becoming more so. And I would hope this chart would actually be different if it went out today. So, when you're talking to product owners and developers, a lot of times they're thinking in their head things like, well, is this a threat to my job? Like, who is this person? What are they trying to do here? Is this going to slow me down? Like, I have goals I'm trying to meet. I have to get things done. Sometimes not the right things done, but to get things done. Will this sabotage what I'm trying to do here? Right. So these are all things that developers and product owners might be thinking in different organizations, especially if it's one that hasn't had design before or user experience. And directors and VPs, they're going to be asking questions like, well, why should we involve our customers and users? We've never done that before. Why should we prototype and test? And of course, SVPs and CEOs, really, they're just asking, what's the ROI? Like, what's the return? How is this going to improve the metrics? How is this going to help me, if it's a publicly traded company, look good next quarter, improve this process, right? So that's what they're thinking about. And to a lot of people, designers are different things, and it just kind of depends on their background, their experience. Some people might think of us as more of an artist, kind of like a Frida Kahlo here, or they might think of us more as an architect and product designer, as Ray Eames. But I would argue that actually we're probably maybe a little bit more like Jane Goodall, right? Like we're understanding people's needs, we're understanding their goals and aspirations, and we're bringing that into the process to make products that work for them and that have value for them. For the guys, I didn't want to leave you out. Some people probably think of us as Andy Warhol, just doing wild and crazy art. Of course, a lot of people, Steve Jobs being a great design genius is looked to quite often, but I would say, again, maybe it's more like a Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? And about understanding the world around us and then applying that. And for the millennials, because I didn't want to leave them out either, maybe Kanye being the artist on one side. I had to keep Steve Jobs here because obviously everyone knows Steve Jobs, but maybe we're more like Bill Nye, again, exploring the world. So explorers using a scientific method, seeking to understand and provide context, right? That's what actually we're doing as user experience designers quite often, whereas historically user experience designers are really more purely about the usability of it or the visual design of it. Now it's becoming more about, does this have value for our customers, or actually what do our customers even need out of our company as a brand? And what's interesting is if you look at the scientific method, it's actually not that different from the design method, right? They share a lot of commonality. In fact, if you go through modern design programs today, this is kind of a course listing from the Center. They talk about sketching and prototyping, user and research practices, quantitative data, metrics and analysis, or in analytics, sorry, and then ethnographic research methods, right? So these are things that as a designer, as a UX designer, these are courses that you would be taking today if you go through one of these programs. But design is everywhere. So it's on the front of Bloomberg, it's on the front of Harvard Business Review. Gartner says 89% of companies believe that customer experience will be their primary basis for competition by 2016. So that's a big number, and this shows you that C-levels are thinking about this. John Maeda, who actually just last week at South by Southwest went through the most recent design and tech report, was working for a venture capital fund that was investing in design-led companies and talking about they believe that design is a critical factor in launching a successful technology venture today. In fact, now this is now really outdated, but it shows companies out there acquiring design-focused organizations to bring that design focus to their organization. Talking about companies like Capital One and Accenture and Facebook, right? They're buying design companies and design thinking and human-centered design practices, right, and rolling them into their organizations to try to figure this out and try to get it within their organization. In fact, at the time in 2004, 43 companies had been acquired. I heard the number was, I don't know, in the hundreds now, I think, with the newest one. But time and time again, and really as working for a design company, we see these in the news quite often. Companies are getting acquired by these firms. And if you look at design-led companies, the year to $1 billion in validation, right? That curve is going down, and all these companies you see here are design-led, which either means they have a designer as a CEO or someone high up in the organization, or just follow really great design practices. So companies like Slack and Oculus and Snapchat, right, and Square. And of course, this is brought up over and over again, but it's still a really valid kind of proof point. Is they actually took a fund of companies that invest in design and pegged it to the S&P 500, and it actually outperformed by 228%. So these are design-centric organizations outperforming. And then if you take another slice of the data and put customer experience laggards in there, it becomes even worse when you compare against companies who are not investing in design at all. Or maybe those companies that originally said design wasn't relevant to their industry. Forrester has a model, and there's lots of different maturity models out there for design and user experience and customer experience, but I always like this one because the first level is outdated, and of course who wants to be in an outdated category there, but is the scope of design just kind of ad hoc, digital components here and there, or is it all the way end to end across the organization? Is design leading the strategy? Is it totally absent, or is it setting the vision? Even things like staffing, like the types and number of people. There's been a number of studies on ratios even about the number of designers that you'd want to have in your organization. Google talks about this quite often. In fact, they released a book, I think, last year called Design Sprints, right? Solving big problems and test new ideas in just 5 days, which is a little misleading. But if you look at it, the investing in user research is just about the only way to consistently generate a rich stream of data about customer needs and behaviors. It informs product managers, engineers, and just about everyone else. It forms the foundation of intuitive designs, indispensable products, and successful companies. Go listen to your customers. That I couldn't agree with more. Go out. Figure out ways to get in front of your customers. And when you look at the amount of money that is potentially wasted in the development of technology tools and applications, so there's a 600 billion spent on digital projects every year, and billions of that are wasted. And if you look at the reasons why, a lot of these things could be easily fixed with design practices. So up to 30% of it's wasted due to poor requirements definitions. Well, if you're involving your customers and users, if you're prototyping and making iterative changes, you're going to have much better requirements defined for the technology team. 67% of projects end up being scrapped because they were underwhelming, right? We've seen a number of projects where someone goes on a year-long project, they build the entire thing, and within that year, maybe a user never even saw it once, and then they release it to find it's not meeting those needs. And up to 50% in developer time spent on rework, right? So if you launch and learn, which some organizations do and do successfully, but in larger projects, especially in the workplace and enterprise side of things, the amount of effort and time it takes the development team to go back and make changes, we could have done all that as designers with design prototyping earlier and often early in the process, and hopefully often. And really, any book you read today, any of these methods, talk about these types of processes, right? So really, there's not a book today that doesn't suggest doing some sort of going out and interacting with customers, doing iterative prototyping, validating things. But there's always this guy that I hear you, but where's that ROI? Here's another great quote. The biggest ROI a brand can have from investments in design is a rapidly growing, loyal, and motivated customer base. And of course, I agree with that, right? If you're going to have customers, if your customers are loyal about your brand, if they're loyal about and excited about everything that you're launching, you're going to have a successful business. And there are ways to track that. So there's things like the Net Promoter Score, which a lot of organizations use. We use that as well. And if you look at the way they scale things, and it's a bit like a usability test. If they don't rate you 8 or a 9, they're just being nice kind of thing. So 0 through 6 are potential detractors. There's some middle room there where they're a bit indifferent, and then there are the promoters, which is what you want. Obviously, you want to increase that number. But again, that's not ROI, right? Just because people like you better, they feel more engaged in your brand, doesn't mean they're giving you more money exactly. So they want to know how UX equals ROI, and so that's what we're going to talk about. So design adds value in kind of 4 main ways. It could add more revenue, and that could be by purely changing some minor things on an e-commerce site and getting more people through the funnel. Reduce costs. So we already talked about a lot of that waste in the development side of things. That's one way to reduce costs. A lot of things around call center or self-service solutions. Time to market. Understanding what you're building and having kind of a blueprint for that can really help you get to market faster. So you actually develop and launch things quicker that way. And new concepts. Going out and observing people. You saw those pictures in the field. Like ideas come from that, right? So I mean, yeah, sure, we could have ideas in this room. We could brainstorm on the wall what our customers might want out of us. But going out and observing people and watching them and seeing what they do and seeing the problems that they have and what jobs they need to be done, like that's a really great way to invent new revenue streams for an organization. In fact, this DROI, measurable design, I have a link here in my deck. It's actually a great paper that a bunch of students put together, and they actually have a really great model for talking about this as well. I recommend you check it out. But typically, we see customer improvements on downloads and conversion and usage and onboarding. On the workplace side, we'll see things like efficiency, ease of use, productivity, time to task, success rate. And on the development side, again, that reduced rework, like that's actually a huge cost savings. You get higher velocity out of your Scrum teams, your Agile teams. You have less documentation because you're doing prototyping. You're involving design within those teams. And then on the marketing side, again, improving that NPS score, just the general market perception, customer insights, lots of different ways that design and design processes can really help your organization across really all the different business units. And so as a designer, when I started out, I was just happy to do a project. I did a project, right? Like that might be what, hey, I did a project. But as you get a little more mature, you start talking about like, oh, I did a project and it improved this metric, right? And then it became, we did this series of projects and it saved or made us money in this way. And at the top, that's when you start learning the language of business and of ROI. So let's talk a minute about more revenue. So here's a public example actually put on usertesting.org, which is which is a usability testing platform. So they talked about increased customer acquisition, and they talked about had an 8% improvement over here at Zillow. StubHub had a 2.6% lift in purchase rate. Bank of America had a 45% increased yield, a 5-step online banking process, and these are real numbers. Now. I would argue that with usertesting.com, really they're looking for what I would consider low-hanging fruit in most cases, right? So you're testing something that is done, or it could be a prototype, or you're testing early and often, but you're finding small changes to help increase these metrics. Now, I would argue the bigger design value could come from doing more in-depth research, things like going out and observing people, contextual inquiries, building out customer experience journey maps, building out deep and rich personas, running Kano studies, doing service blueprints, right? So usability testing is definitely one of those things, but there's a lot more that could be done that I would argue that would even increase those metrics even more. And I thought this chart was funny because it shows this group had a 60% increase, this group had 8% increase, this group had a 45%, StubHub had a 2.6, but there's no real context here, so I don't know what that translated to dollars, right? And again, we're talking about ROI and dollars. So I wanted to take a look at StubHub because we actually worked with a group that does some similar business to StubHub, and so I knew a little bit about that business. I wanted to take a look at it. And so they said, soon after implementing the change, StubHub realized a 2.6% increase in conversion rate, which resulted in millions of dollars in extra revenue. Today, the Go button is on every event page on StubHub's website. And so there you go. We're already sounding better. Millions, 2.6, millions of dollars of extra savings. All right, that's sounding good, but let's dig a little deeper. Now, StubHub is owned by eBay, and of course, eBay is a publicly traded company, and so you could go look at their annual report, which is sometimes a great place to go look for numbers around what's going on within that organization. And what's funny is in that report, it says, our StubHub platform, the largest ticket marketplace in the US, accelerated year over year with a GMV of $3.6 billion, growing 13%, and a revenue of $725 million, up 15%. During the year, we made a number of product and experience enhancements to the StubHub platform, which we believe contributed to StubHub's strength. So in their annual report, they're actually talking about the experience changes or what helped them get their revenues up 15%, which is great. And just to go back to the change was actually a very small change from a link to a button, right? It was very small. Again, I would consider low-hanging fruit design change, and I'm sure there were other things that they were working on as well, but it had a large effect. And so now we're talking numbers. So 3.6 billion in overall market, so all the tickets being sold within their marketplace, and 725 million in revenue. Like those are good numbers. And so, you could say it this way, but we know a couple things. With their online only, a 2.6 increase to their market value to the market is 93 million, and 2.6 increase to revenue was an additional $18 million. And so you could say something like, through proper usability testing and user experience practices, we were able to identify key issues, and with some minor improvements, increased GMV by $93 million over a single year. Right now, we're talking real ROI, real dollars. Right? Show me the money, right? There we go. Now you could also talk about, okay, what was the cost of the changes? So in this case, they were actually pretty small changes, or at least the ones that were documented there on the user testing side. And so imagine you had a team of 3, maybe they're making $80K a year. That's $240K. You got 5% of the year that they worked on this project. Maybe that's something like $12,000. So maybe it costs $12,000. I don't know. Even if it costs $100,000, it's definitely smaller than the increase of $18 million. And so if you do the math there, it's 150,000% ROI, which actually sounds quite crazy. I don't know if I'd actually say that, because who's going to believe it? Now, just another story here. Jared Spool, a well-known user experience designer, talks about the $300 million button in a very true story. So they made some small changes. The result, the number of customers purchasing went up by 45%. The extra purchases resulted in an extra $15 million in the first month. For the first year, the site saw an additional $300 million. And this was really determining that they needed to have a guest checkout process through testing. And that's actually what got them to that. And so you could say through proper usability testing and user experience practices, we were able to identify key issues and with some minor improvements, increase GMV by almost $100 million over a single year with less than a $20K investment, right? And if you notice, I didn't mention the ROI because again, the ROI sounds crazy, but again, hey, true. But just showing that it was only a $20K investment to get that, it sounds great. So now let's talk about reduced costs. So in the workplace, we do a lot of work in the workplace. That's pretty common for us, and there's a lot of savings to be had there. In fact, Human Factors International has a number of ROI calculators where they actually will kind of go through increased productivity, reduction on help desks, and in there they actually break down the math and show you how do they get to those numbers. Although it was funny because they had salary at $30K a year and the improvement cost of $10K, and I would argue both those are probably off. But let's talk about a company, Dell. Dell sells 40 million computers a year. Do you think they get 5 million calls off the 40 million computers? Yeah, I bet they do. And if you look at how much call center calls cost, an average call center call is $4.50 per call, but for a tech support call, which is more likely what Dell would get, it's over $10 per call. And so for every call cut, that's $10 saved, right? Self-support, that could be one way to cut calls. Like if you had better tool sets online, better ways for people to interact with the site, a better experience, right? They would be calling in less. And so if you could even cut 500,000 calls out of that, it would save $5 million. So could you do a $4 million project to build a stellar self-support system? Right? It would be, you would still be making an extra $1 million off of that. And if you look at how much it would cost to staff a call center, there's a couple companies that will outsource your call center for you. That's $55 million yearly to support those 5 million calls. And so if the cost to improve is less than the return on you get, that's great, right? And so the other way to look at it is you could shave 5 minutes off every call. And that would save $10 million if you just reduce the amount of time that they spent on the call. And these are both cost-neutral projects in most cases, which most CIOs and CTOs and CEOs love, right? So it's you're going to spend much less than you're going to save or make. So it actually didn't cost you anything, right? And actually, I keep saying the word cost. You actually try to switch a bit to say investment, because that's truly what it is. So if you invest this, you're going to have a savings of this, which means there's actually no cost to the company. So give me 1 million and I'll save you 10, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to take that? And so, again, ROI in this case is, either shaving time off every call, which I would say is highly doable, seeing that, we work in the call center space, and some of these call center apps that we've seen, it's definitely, there are some low-hanging fruit there as well, but there's also some bigger changes that can be made. There's both. Or reducing calls to the call center through self-support. And so you could say, through understanding our customers' needs via observational studies, we were able to prototype, design, and launch an improved self-support tool that reduced calls to the call center by 20%. That saved over $10 million the first year at an ROI of 833%, right? That creates a great story. And those are the metrics that you'd be tracking to. So let's talk a minute about digital transformation, kind of a buzzword right now. What does it mean? So I always kind of say it's moving your businesses to effective digital technologies. There are some companies that long ago had moved to digital, but sometimes they have two systems that don't even talk to each other, right? And so you're a customer over here and you call in, or you're a customer over here on the website and they don't even know you exist, right? So even if you've gone digital, it may not be effective. But we still talk to lots of organizations, going paperless. It's still a thing, right? We've worked with organizations that a lot of their work is done by walkie-talkies, fax machines, and paper. Moving to cloud-based tools, connecting systems across businesses, adding sensors to equipment, and all these should lead to better experiences, more efficiency, and just less manual processes, which are usually costly. In fact, the gov.uk, they actually have a government digital services group. They actually have a really mature experience practice in this group. And because they're a public entity in the UK, they actually talk about it publicly and blog about it. There's a lot of really good information in there. But how digital and technology transformation saved 1.7 billion pounds last year, right? That's a pretty substantial number. And if you look at what they talk about, they always start with user needs. They're agile. They work to a set of design principles, and they work openly, again, because they're a government organization. And so, they had more than 600 million pounds of this year's $1.7 billion figure were through the work done by GDF, the experience kind of arm of that group itself. And they talk about spin control, and they talk about coaching their teams to start prototyping instead of writing these long requirements documents. But they had over 98% of self-driving tests were now booked online. 85% of self-assessment filing is done through online channels. 12 million people have registered to vote using a new digital service, right? And these are where some of these cost savings are coming from. And so, if it costs 58 million pounds and they had 600 million pounds in saving, that's 1,000% ROI on that entire group, right? So that's great. They have a group. The cost for the group is 60 million pounds, but it saved over 600 million pounds, right? So that's a great way of defending your organization and the value you bring to an organization. So you could say the UK government saved 600 million pounds in 1 year at an ROI of more than 1,000% by digitally transforming a number of services to better serve its citizens across the UK. So time to market, getting to market faster. So we talked about prototypes. I kind of mentioned that. Dig a little deeper here. Here's a great quote. There's a great book called Building Better Products. Let's stop just shipping features, crossing our fingers and hoping they work. Let's figure out how we can test whether we're moving in the right direction before we commit 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars towards building something. Right? That's great, and I absolutely love that. And in fact, if all product owners could read this, because we've seen a number of projects that have gone on for 6 months, years, without even involving they're involving the buyers, but they're not involving the people who actually have to use the product. There's a number of studies out there about calculating the ROI of digital prototyping, and it talks about finance teams, and they know that products fail at an astonishing rate, and it's all these unpredictable outcomes. And this is where really we can help as a design organization. We could be an insurance policy in a way to make sure the thing that you're building is actually meeting the needs of the people that you're going to launch it to and give it to. So developing a product without user research is essentially one very expensive experiment, which according to industry benchmark will have a 90% chance of not paying off, right? Not at least without post-launch modifications, which we'd already talked about are much more expensive. Remember, and this is from Marty Kagan, a great guy to follow online, some great books out there. Remember that our higher order objective is to validate our ideas the fastest, cheapest way possible. Actually building and launching a product idea is generally the slowest, most expensive way to validate the idea. So understanding what value your users need from you and your product, prototyping, rapid iterative prototyping and validation, right? These are all things that you should be doing in this process. They talk about, the time you try 20 things, you'll have a 64% chance of success. By the time you try 50 things, you'll have a 92% chance of success. So sometimes you need to try quite often. Again, doing the design iterative prototyping up front, where it is fast and easy, is where you really want to do that, not after you launch. Fail you will, so fail fast you should. Even the cost of change. Here's a great mark to show, on the idea, obviously easy to make changes. Once something's committed to code, harder to make changes. And again, there's lots of studies about the probabilities and how you could reduce the chance of failure. And so, we find even working with blended teams helps as well. So having UX designers, having designers paired with a development team also helps with that. In fact, we've pegged our teams here because we always have developers and designers kind of paired together in these blended teams, pegged with offshore and even onshore internal teams. We found us to be 40% faster, and some of that is because we use pattern libraries and design systems. We have data to back up the designs that we're creating. We're building prototypes, right? And then obviously all the modern development processes as well. There's a number, 1, 10, 100. So for every $1 invested in UX, you save 10 in fixing issues during development, and 100 if the product has already been released. I think every CTO or CIO would agree with you there. Now let's talk about new concepts for a minute. Daisy's a local company here in Dallas, and they produce great sour cream, very, very well known, very famous. I'm sure everyone's seen it in the grocery store. They actually had a group go out and do in-home studies. This is great. They're doing observational ethnographic style studies on how people use sour cream. So they actually sent researchers into people's homes as they're cooking, as they're eating, and they found out that there were a couple cases where people were trying to get the right amount of sour cream just for them. So not as in cooking, but as putting on your food. And they noticed they didn't really have a solution for that. And if you see here, this squeeze container here didn't exist. So they went out, they studied, they found some jobs that needed to be filled, they found some problems that needed to be solved. They did rapid prototyping on a number of different types of containers, different ways of solving that problem, and they launched this. And you can get this today, and this is in most grocery stores. And They go on to say, in the short time it has been in the market, Daisy Squeeze ranks among the top 10 sour cream items in sales. In a recent customer survey, 60% of Daisy Squeeze users said they would recommend the product to a friend, 20% more than average. Which is great. So I have some additional questions if I could speak to that business owner. Did it cannibalize sales or did it increase sales? What was the increase of sales? Did it impact their revenues? And did it increase the overall share of the sour cream market, right? So those are questions that you would want to dig a little deeper in. But you could say, Daisy increased whatever those metrics would be by using observational studies in people's homes during dinner times and rapid prototyping to innovate on a new product that met the needs of modern consumers, which is great. And actually, it's fun to see a process that we do here on the software and technology side being done there on food, in the food category. So why are observations so powerful? I actually have multiple talks on this as well. So I have putting the user back in user experience and kind of top trends in product design. We're understanding customers. So I'm very passionate about this and talk about this quite often. But many well-known companies have public stories. So I've been tracking about using ethnographic studies in-home, follow me home, right? Really understanding, and all these companies have stories about how they're going out, observing people, bringing that data back, and putting that data back into the pipeline to build products that their customers are really looking for from them. And again, I showed this earlier, like here are the types of things that really build that deep understanding. So you could start a project, a new project from day one. You can have a brainstorming session, but we do recommend making sure that you have a deep understanding of your users and customers, which isn't always the case in a lot of organizations. When you talk about the average lifespan of a company in general, it's been decreased by more than 50 years. This is 15 years today. You really have to stay in front of your customers, in front of your users, and you really have to understand what they want from your products, from your brand to stay relevant in today's world. And so just a quick note about disruption in surveys. This was in 2011, there's a survey put out. BlackBerry is also well positioned for future growth. Love that quote. 24% of consumers claim their next handset will be a BlackBerry, well above the 3% for Apple's iPhone. This is in 2011. And of course, if you see in 2011, they had roughly 11% of the market share. It was declining. And I know I think last month there was a story that they officially have 0% of the market now. But customers claim, right? That's something that you have to watch out for and something you have to look for. Asking versus observe. This is from the Envision blog. They do a lot of great stuff. So people in everyday life don't really know what they need. They just tell you what they think they want. People don't always know what they say, and they rarely know how they'll act in the future. So people will give you an aspirational view of themselves. People are poor at predicting their future behavior. Some behavior is just subconscious, and people are always swayed from moment to moment, and they want to fit in. And this is why going out and observing people, we feel like is so powerful. If you've seen Jimmy Kimmel's Lie News, where he basically goes up to people and tells them a totally fictitious story, and of course they immediately agree that they heard the story, and they start commenting on the story, you'll see why this happens in surveys. In fact, Forrester has done a report recently talking about building real customer understanding and saying that companies aren't doing enough of ethnographic studies, contextual inquiries, and diary studies, and this is actually where you get more of that real, rich information. Our CEO likes to talk a bit about it being a continuum and about how your users start kind of as a sketch and you really want to fill that in, and that's what these design processes are for, really to fill in that picture and create that deep understanding. So Project 202, we spent some time, I already mentioned, talking to CEOs and CTOs, and so we've actually built a way to talk about kind of metrics so that we're achieving in the marketplace. And so here's one where we actually helped launch some flight operations software. So this is the software that where are the planes, which ones are delayed, what gate are they at, and they saw a 15% improvement during weather events with this new system, and that's great. And so you want to track that. And so the method we kind of use is talk about the ROI first, because again that's what's going to grab their attention. Again, something they're really looking for. Talk about the scale of the problem. They have 40,000 employees, 3,000 daily flights, and then the project details, right? And this is a great way to build a story. And so, and in fact, it's funny, on the airline one, Kevin Green, our digital transformation officer, went in and you could find public information that really drills down to how much a cost of a delay would be for an airline. And so, sure, you have to use multiple data sources in some cases, but there's always a metric somewhere, and there's always a way to get to that data, no matter where you are in the organization. In this case, that 15% could save up to $500K a day, which is good money. And so, we've done this, radically improving sales, double revenues by increasing conversion rate by 54%. And so, these are the different types of stories that we tell when we're able to be with a client all the way through the project, which we prefer to do and showcase the launch. So, loyalty program, 1.5 million loyalty customers in just over 6 months. So it's finding out those metrics and then being able to retell those metrics. And just a minute on design systems as well. So we've done a number of projects where we're actually helping them take multiple products that maybe are not very consistent and bring consistency to them through modern design systems. And that's where you can kind of have these sticker sheets here. But whereas the designers and product owners and developers, you're not reinventing the wheel every time. You're using the same components across all the applications. And Heath Stalling runs our UX team here in Dallas, and he actually put together a business case of a design systems and the savings that can happen from these design systems. And in some cases, depending on the scale of your development team and the number of products that you have, it could be saving millions of dollars a year, or developer time, which they could be used spending on building features, new features for customers. In fact, Dawn Russell, I saw her at a conference recently. She's with Intuit, and she talked about that they had a not only design system, but they're actually building out components, or the Enterprise UX conference. And so she had 52% reduction in calls due to account recovery, which saved $560K support costs in 1 year. And really, it was because they used design patterns to better experiences for account recovery, right? Again, very low-hanging fruit in this case to get a really big effect. So again, I already kind of talked about the more revenue, reduced cost, time to market, new concepts. We see this. Every company can use design in different ways, but design really in a single project, you could potentially hit on all 4 of these. So 5 things to remember real quick. Dig deeper. There's always numbers, so sometimes you have to dig and go deep. Sometimes you have to go public information, annual reports, go to your product owners, go to your business teams, like somewhere the data is there. Investment versus cost. Again, what you're doing is not a cost to them, it's an investment. And a lot of times it's even cost neutral. Move from I did this to what the results were. So it's not I did a project, I was on that project, it was we achieved these results, we achieved these business gains. I just mentioned cost neutral again. The C-levels love this. Like, I'm going to spend this much, but it's going to save you this much, right? Like that's a great story to tell. And if you can't measure it, you can measure it. So lots of people, we've talked with organizations, what are you trying to do here? What metrics are you trying to improve? And blank stares. And sometimes it's just because they've been tasked with replatforming some piece of technology or software. And so they're not thinking about the numbers behind it. There are always numbers somewhere. And sometimes you might even have to coach that business team into finding out what those metrics are so that you could work towards them. And so next time your boss says, well, why should I keep you around? You just tell them because I'm the one that prints the money. All right, thank you very much. Again, Jeremy Johnson online. I have all my decks and presentations available, and so feel free to visit and download. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.